Good afternoon. Good afternoon. And what I'm going to go into today is a really quick and I would say succinct review of Industry Season 4. And Industry Season 4 is a show kind of based around the financial markets, but it also kind of mixes in relationships, some overarching themes of what's going on inside the world currently. And the reason why I started watching is because I like market-based stuff, and it's very, very hard to find really market-based shows that kind of stick in line with the markets. There was a show that came out, I want to say maybe a few years ago, about a guy running a hedge fund, and it's your typical television show to where you got to really suspend a lot of your disbelief just to watch the show. And that's kind of what made it attractive to a lot of people. But when you actually watched it, funds really don't work that way. However, it was just good television for the people that don't really understand how funds worked. The reason why I like Industry, because they got a little bit more in depth to how funds and how the market actually works and how the IPO space actually works and how the venture capital space actually works and how time and sales actually works in real life, because one of the main characters started off in time and sales and then moved her way up. So that's kind of what I liked about the show. So they're on season 4, which I think just wrapped. Let's see how long this thing plays out. We're in a different era now to where shows take a break and they'll be off for 2 years. Where when I was coming up, you got a show every year. And you also got more episodes. We do 8 episodes now. You remember the guy that just passed away? I forgot his name. He was on Dawson Creek. If you look up Dawson Creek, they were doing 20 episodes. That's called a season. Now it takes 3 years to get 8 episodes. Right? I don't know how actors get paid anymore because you're not doing enough work to really make any money. But it's whatever, right? So let's see how long they can keep this going. But we're going to kind of talk about at the end. Let's see what they have to do to expand it. So that's what we're going to talk about it. We're going to look at it from an operator standpoint to where we're going to cut away a lot of what the mainstream will be looking at. And we're going to get into more of how to look at this from an operator, because anytime you're looking at something market-based, you want to find out, does it make sense for how the market actually works? And can I take anything from it? Because there may be some things that you can learn. And one of the things I do like about Industry is that you're not used to how the markets actually function. You can get some insight on how they actually function in the real world, where the other show about the guy running the hedge fund, to me, it really didn't make a lot of sense. But that's how most shows work, where they just kind of create a framework of what's supposed to be going on. But in every scenario in the show is like, it's almost like a cartoon based on how believable it is. So we're going to give this a 7 out of 10. Right? A decent character development across the timeline. Not great, but decent. Finance mixed with relationship drama. Right? So they got to take the finance, but put relationship drama in there to kind of make it more interesting to a larger group of people. Decent show to understand market-based topics. Throughout the whole 4 years, they've done a really good job of introducing market-based topics, especially to people that have very little to no exposure to the markets. And the beginners can get lost in the market-based topics and start to get bored. And that's something that you'll see this season. It wasn't as much, I think, season 2 and 3, where they really get deep into how the markets actually function. And I think beginners, without understanding how markets actually function, can get bored. When they were doing the one, I think it was season 4, where they were going through the IPO process early on in that particular season. For people that really don't understand and really don't care, I think it could be boring. And so that's something that I think kind of stops the show from really, really expanding, is because it's so market-based and because the average person, their market to them is a supermarket or Amazon. They may not have a point of reference. We talked about that before, to where this is how I understand it because this is what I've been exposed to before. And so I think that can be one of the issues. So let's keep going. So let's go into one of the major topics of this season. One of the major topics of this season was short selling. And the reason why I like that is because I spent a large amount of my time in the market looking to short stocks, normally with put options. And short selling is something that a lot of people don't understand. Most people don't understand that you can make money in the market when the market goes up and goes down. And it's because the average American is only exposed to buying and holding. and they're only exposed to funds where their charter says they can only buy and hold. Therefore, they panic when the market goes down because they don't know how to take advantage of that situation. They have no idea. And that's just kind of how they're programmed. They're programmed by financial advisors. They're programmed by, I don't know, whoever goes to school to try to tell people what to do with their money, that you should just buy a position and hold it for an extended period of time. And that's how you make your money. And so I think taking this particular narrative is going to lose a lot of people because they really don't understand what short selling is and the goal of short selling. And in the particular, I would say, season, a short selling firm was created by one of the characters. They were running one firm and decided to get out of that and start a short selling firm. To me, it was a bad idea because it's very hard to create alpha with a firm totally concentrated on short selling, especially as you start to add on more money. It's easy for me as a retail investor with a relatively small account, right, of a few $1,000s here and there to just concentrate on the short side of the market. As your account starts to expand into the millions and millions and millions, it's going to be hard to find opportunities if the firm is totally focused on short selling. It's difficult because there's not going to be a lot of places to put the money. And when you're watching a particular series, the firm did not understand how to pitch the value proposition, even though one of the founders was a seasoned general manager. That to me was where you had to kind of suspend some of your disbelief that a seasoned general manager wouldn't understand how to pitch the value proposition of the particular firm. But they did that to create conflict, right? So I get it. And then what we saw was one of the founders put up around 10 million to finance the firm. And then the other founder just like put up computers. That's not really a equal partnership, because then how do you get distributions from that? If one person puts up cash money, 10 million, and the other person says, well, I got some computers from my last situation I had going on, so we can use my computers and I staff it. If we ever make money, how do we do distributions? So that kind of also was where you had to suspend your disbelief, because it really wouldn't work that way. The other person would have to try to figure out some way to how to build more equity into this new situation, right? So that's what kind of wasn't reasonable or believable. But I appreciated the investigative short selling angle in the script. So what they did was they did what we call investigative short selling, where you go and you investigate a firm and you go and look through what they actually have going on. You start going behind the scenes. You may even take visits, and that's called investigative short selling. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of energy, which is why most people don't do it, which is why it's so easy for companies to get away with stuff. If a company says our main offices are in wherever, Istanbul, most people are not going to go to Istanbul to see if they're telling the truth. Or if the company says we have major operations in certain parts of Africa, most people are not going to travel to Africa to see if they're telling the truth. They won't, because they just take their word for it. And so that's one of the reasons why companies can get away with a lot of stuff. Most companies, not say most companies, many companies are dog-ish, and they just got a good story because they know people like stories. And if you are a smaller cap firm, you can get people to buy into your story, and there can really be nothing going on operationally. But because of the price of the stock, they won't look into it because their attitude is it's cheap. And if I can get double in 5 years, it's a good investment. So they'll never really look into what's really going on. Many people underestimate how easy it is to go public, and I mean relatively easy, and hire a PR firm for TV and podcast spots. When I say easy to go public, I don't mean it's going to cost $10. It's going to cost a few $1 million. You got to hire a lot of attorneys. You have to actually get approved to go public. But it's not such a barrier to where we don't see firms going public that really don't have a strong business case. That's how we know it's not that difficult. And then all you do is you hire a PR firm. They get you on certain TV shows, and then they get you certain podcast spots, and it starts to shape a narrative around what you're doing. And you just get on there, you tell a good story. And it works. I've seen it work multiple times to like great success. And so that's what I did appreciate about that particular narrative or that particular storyline, is because I've looked at a lot of things like full disclosure, I'm still short Cracker Barrel because the story that they're feeding us doesn't match the numbers around Cracker Barrel. So they're feeding us a story, but the numbers don't match. But you see people buying it because they're buying the story or they're buying what they think it could be, and they're disregarding the numbers. But the numbers really tell the story, not the story that they're telling. But that's just how business works. Next part of it, it goes into the topic of knowing who you are. So one of the characters suffered an identity crisis, which allowed him to be manipulated by almost everyone. And that was a big part of this particular season where you had one of the main characters. They had a massive identity crisis. And what it did was it opened them up to be manipulated by a lot of different people. And eventually at the last episode or the last show of the season, he snapped out of it and accepted that he needed medical intervention to maintain his well-being. So if you watch it, he was on a plane and the guy gave him a fake ID. And he realized, like, I'm supposed to like go around with this guy with this fake ID. And in reality, he actually has status in his society that he lives in. And that's kind of when he snapped out of it. Like, this is not really what I need to be doing with my life. And then he finally confronted the guy around what he was involved in. But it took all of that for him to really kind of accept who he actually was, because he had a massive identity crisis. And so that's what I want people to understand, is that if you don't really know who you are and why you are who you are, you know, you can be shape-shifted in whoever other people need you to be. And that was a big storyline going through season 4, where this particular character really didn't know who he was. He didn't know why he was who he was. And it just allowed other people to shape-shift him. And he didn't kind of snap out of it until the last show. And it also accepted that he needed medical intervention. And some people in our world, they need medical intervention to function. And it's just, it is what it is. Whether they need to take insulin, right? Or they need to take some type of I don't know what you want to call it, psychological drug, whatever they need to do to continue to maintain their situation. That's just what they have to do. And a lot of people struggle with that reality, and it's detrimental to their health. And it's also detrimental to the people around them, because they can't function at their highest level because they're not healthy. And so we saw this particular character struggling with that, and then finally having to come to terms at the end of it that, yeah, I just got to take this medication just for me to do what I need to do. Okay. So let's go to the next one, right? Which is also part of the storyline. Prostitution and blackmail. Okay. One of the characters decided to use prostitutes and blackmail to offer favors and persuade people. And that was one of the main characters in this particular season, where their thing was, I'm going to use prostitutes. I'm going to use blackmail. So we're going to use the prostitutes to offer favors. And then we're going to use blackmail to persuade you, because now we got you with the prostitute. I've been talking about this on this channel for years. A lot of people don't like it. It is what it is. They don't have to like it, because the message is going to be unpopular. And if you actually understand how things work, a lot of messages ain't supposed to be about popularity in real life, not just for internet fame. This is how a lot of people get caught up, because once people know that they can tempt you with that type of stuff, that's going to be what they're going to use on you. And this thing with prostitutes and blackmail, it's real common in many social circles. A lot of y'all don't know nothing about it because it's not the type of people you hang around. And then 2, you don't have enough money. So, you know, a lot of dudes are trying to have sex for free. A lot of women is trying to have sex for free. But there's a space where people just pay for it. Or they try to use their status to get it. It don't matter, right? So then once people figure out that's what you want, they'll introduce that to you, but then they'll use that to blackmail you on the back end. So the show ends with a character decided to become a courtier to the rich and connected, and then using prostitutes to facilitate this access. So one of the characters decided, if I want to get access to the rich and powerful, I'll use prostitutes to get access to it, because they'll know me as a person where I always got the prostitutes. And so anything any kind of party, any kind of soiree, any kind of get together, any kind of kickback that I'm associated with, where they know I'm gonna have the prostitutes. And when you really get laced in this game, you can see them chicks a mile away. Like, you can just show me certain stuff. Oh yeah, that's just a room full of prostitutes. Y'all can't see it because, like I say, most of y'all from the cities don't even have blades. But this is a real big thing in the world, where now we got women on the internet, right, creating whole communities and teaching women how to be prostitutes. So they're doing very similar to what this character decided to be in the show. Well, I'm going to create a ecosystem, and my job is just to produce prostitutes, right? So that's just, it is what it is. It's just a big part in many social circles where many women feel like my value in this circle is that I'm a prostitute and I'm going to use that to get access to what I want. And it is what it is, right? But you got to understand there's things that come with that for everybody that's involved in these type of relationships. So that's part of that particular episode. So let's go and close it, right? One of the few shows that actually show how markets and funds really work. That's one thing I do like about it, is that starting even with season 1, it's one of the few shows that actually show you how markets actually function and how funds actually work, right? Because they started off with all the main characters working at this particular fund in the UK. One thing they've done, though, is they got to include sex to expand the audience. The average person doesn't know the difference between an option and a stock. They don't know. Therefore, to make it to where it's not just this really strict market-based show, let's introduce a lot of sex into it, because we know in the world that we currently live in, people love sex. I don't get it. The reason why I don't get it is because pornography is free. I don't get the appeal of watching a show so I can see people naked and having sex. When if that's really what I want to watch, I can just go watch pornography, which is free. So people paying for HBO Plus, I believe, because it's on the HBO network. You paying for HBO Plus. Why are you paying to watch porn or paying to watch soft porn when it's all free now? It's 2026. That's why I don't get it, but I'm not the audience for that. I'm there to watch the market-based stuff, right? But I still don't get like why people still need that. But everybody's different. Like, I don't get why if you go to certain parts of the Middle East, they got to serve you alcohol. Do you have to drink that bad? But people do. That's why if you go to certain like Dubai, places like that, they serve you alcohol even though you in a Islamic environment, because they know that people got to drink. They just have to. They can't control themselves. So it's just a difference in who you're trying to appeal to. So that's something that you see in all of these shows. Just give you a heads up. There's a lot of sexual content, and I think they're doing that to try to expand the audience. So the show will eventually move to less market-based ideas, in my opinion, if they want to grow the audience even larger. Most people don't know about this show. They don't have any idea it even exists. It hasn't really hit big, and I think it's because it's so market-based. Let's see in season 5 if they stay with the market-based narratives, or if they try to go to something else that's going to allow them to bring in a more general audience. Because again, the average person don't know the difference between an option and stock. They don't know anything about short selling. So there was a lot of scenes in episode 4 that a lot of people don't even understand what they're doing, because they don't understand why they're doing it. Because in their mind, just go buy a stock. Like, why are you trying to get information on this particular company? Is because you want to present that they're fraudulent based on us doing research on this particular company. The average person don't even understand what all this work is for. So I think that's going to limit their growth, but it 7 out of 10. So that's going to be my review. It's not anything somebody got to break their neck to watch. It's not going anywhere. I would again give a warning for sexual content that I don't think is even really relevant to the episodes, but again, they have to pull it in and bring in a bigger audience. However, if you want to get a basic understanding first of how people actually, what they need to do when they work in a fund and some of the responsibilities and some of the pressures that they have on them, the early episodes are good. Then I think season 4 is more based on IPOs, and there's some really good stuff in there based on how the IPO, I would say, process works. And in season 3 was IPO. Season 4 is more based on short selling and some of the things that involve trying to be a short seller and how you have to get people to buy into your narrative. And then, it all worked out for them, but it also cannot work out. So that's going to be it. Hope you got some value from it. David W. Williams, also known as a retail trader. Talk to you later.